Troops. Most of them are used in a wide variety of armies, and pretty much no troop is useless. However, there are a number of troops that are never really talked about, not used much, or simply fell from the spotlight. Today, I'm going to be talking about just that, the most underrated troops in Clash of Clans that also happen to be very fun to use. With that being said, let's get right into it.
Let's do this.
Ice Golem. Unlocked at Town Hall 11, it is basically a golem with less HP, but drops a free spell. It's used in a wide variety of strategies, even on defense and clan castles, but mostly in combination with a bat swarm, witches, bowlers, or all of them. Let me ask you something. When's the last time you heard someone suggest an Ice Golem army? If this was 5 years ago, I would have said like yesterday or a couple of minutes ago, but nowadays it seems like no one ever talks about the Ice Golem anymore. Are its best days behind it or what? Well, no, not at all. Actually, for anyone who watched my easiest 3-star armies video I did a while back, I was a very big fan of pairing mass ice golems with a bat swarm, and not only is it very strong, it's also very satisfying to see so many free spells being dropped whilst the bats just go crazy. It's surprisingly really easy and it's really fun to farm with, even without the bats and clan castle. It simply makes an otherwise difficult base pretty easy to 3-star with the right combination of troops. Now, obviously people do use the Ice Golem and have been for years, but the reason I believe it's underrated is simply the fact that it's rarely ever talked about anymore and often feels forgotten. I think part of the reason for that is nowadays there's better troops to suggest than the Ice Golem. I mean, the meta is constantly evolving, and what was the strongest years ago may not be the strongest now. But regardless, like I said, the Ice Golem is really fun and satisfying with the right combination of troops. Super Witch. Unlocked at Town Hall 12, the Super Witch is commonly seen in smash attacks due to her pretty high HP and damage. The stats are pretty comparable to a Yeti with over 2 times the housing space, but you won't be complaining about that because the big boys that she spawns are pretty dang beefy, having more HP and damage than the witch herself. I like to think of it as like a miniature golem and wizard combination. However, for a very long time, no one ever talked about the Super Witch after the Town Hall you unlock them at, despite being a very fun troop at Town Hall 13 and 14 sometimes. This is not because the Super Witch was a bad troop, but rather because she was slow at what she did. It took forever for the big boy to respawn, so much that in the upper Town Halls, this would lead to time fails where you simply didn't have enough time to finish the attack, so it was not a very popular choice. Regardless, the Super Witches have always been a fun choice for farming where time may not matter that much, and for years it was very underrated. To be honest, when's the last time you opened a defense log and seen Super Witches? For me, it's not very often. With all that being said, some of you may or may not be aware of a indirect buff the Super Witches got in a recent update, specifically the February 2024 balance changes that basically made summoners spawn units faster, and that applies to the Super Witches as well. Pair that up with the Warden's Rage Gem and you have yourself some very strong and fast Super Witches. Now, I've been using Super Witches for a bit and I've been having a blast, and I can confidently say that time is not as big of an issue anymore. They're fun, and there's never been a better time to mess around and give her another shot at the upper Town Halls. Dragon Rider. Unlocked at Town Hall 13, the Dragon Rider can be seen in many air attacks, mostly playing a role as support. Usually there's dragons, balloons, or both in front of them, and they stay behind helping take out defenses. Now, much like the Super Witch, it's very good at the Town Hall you unlock them at, and even higher. Strategies like Hydra, which is dragons and dragon riders, is very spammy and easy to get a hang of. However, for a long time, it was pretty clear that it begins to get harder to apply at upper Town Halls, and most players just end up using something else and completely forget about the Dragon Rider. Like most troops on this list, it's not that the Dragon Rider sucks, but the meta usually gravitates toward the stronger and easier troops to use, and so certain troops become forgotten or super underrated. However, hero equipment has proved to be useful for many troops, and the Dragon Rider is no exception. Utilizing the Rage Gem for the Warden has been a pretty popular choice for bringing Dragon Riders at the upper town halls, which makes them more useful up there. They're still not that popular, which is why many consider them underrated or slept on, but it's certainly interesting seeing the impact of hero equipment on troops that were previously nowhere to be seen at these town halls. I mean, goddamn, I might give them a try. They look cool as hell, and yeah, that's all it takes for me apparently. Super Hog Rider. Available at Town Hall 13, the Super Hog Rider is basically a Hog Rider that can split into 2 troops, and the stats are pretty decent. It's most commonly used in competitive play and high-level attacks with a strategy known as Queen Charge Twin Hog, where the Super Hog Rider pushes inside the base and the regular Hogs clean up outside buildings. Despite them being very powerful though, you don't really see them in casual play. I mean, I don't. Maybe I'm just in the wrong clan and league and town hall? I don't know, it can't be a coincidence. You're most likely to see the traditional miner and hog combo, as that has been around for years, and you can also do that as low as Town Hall 10, compared to the Super Hogs being available only after Town Hall 13. But when you do get to Town Hall 13, I think any hybrid player will tell you to give it a shot and definitely don't sleep on them. Not only is QC Twin Hog a pretty powerful 3-star strategy, the Super Hogs can also be seen in many other powerful attacks, and the fact is, they're just fun troops. Even if you're not going to war with them or anything like that, farming with them is a very unique experience. Apprentice Warden. Unlocked at Town Hall 13, the Apprentice Warden is seen in pretty much any strategy. I mean, you could throw him in any army, really. He's basically a smaller Grand Warden giving troops in his aura more HP. However, his release was a rather confusing one, and a big part of the reason why he's not discussed more often. I mean, at launch he was a mediocre troop, then he suddenly became good without a single buff, but then he got nerfed? What's going on? Well, at the time of its release, hero equipment did not exist, so in most situations where the average player would have needed an apprentice, they could have just used their warden. And because they didn't stack, unless you were doing something specific where you needed the apprentice, it was probably better to save that 20 housing space. But then hero equipment came out, and now the apprentice can take the warden's place, and you could put something else on your warden. This took the warden from useful to very useful overnight, and it became very popular in many armies, but especially in combination with the Root Rider. Despite the indirect buff though, outside of competitive play and high-level attacks, the apprentice remained low-key for a while, and many considered it to be very underrated. Fast forward to recently, the apprentice got nerfed, and it seems to be directly tied to his role in the Root Rider meta. Free my boy Apprentice, he didn't do anything. Despite the nerf though, I don't think the Apprentice is going anywhere, and I think over time more casual players will get comfortable using it and finding more usability as more warden abilities come out. You just have to think of the Apprentice as the life gem equipment to some degree, but in a troop form. Ice Hound. Unlocked at Town Hall 12, the Ice Hound is basically what the Ice Golem is to the regular Golem, in that it's a lava hound with more HP and freezing capabilities. Its use cases is also exactly like the Ice Golem but with air attacks, so you'll see it in just about any strategy that can benefit from a flying tank with a freeze. And even Bat Swarm, which I didn't even know, and now I have to try because I like Bat Swarm. Despite it having good stats and not much more housing space, it's one of the least used super troops and arguably one of the least talked about ones in the game. Why does no one talk about it, and why isn't it in popular strategies like Lalo? Makes no sense, it's gotta freeze. Well, you can incorporate the Ice Hound into Lalo attacks, it is a thing, but it's not very common to see because of that increase in housing space. But most importantly, the 2 super troop slots are often used with something else like super Wobbeckers and sneaky goblins. With that being said, I think where the Ice Hound really shines is farming, where you can actually have fun and mess around with it. Most strategies that use a Lava Hound can be swapped with an Ice Hound, and it makes up for some very fun attacks. Like I said earlier, it's not popular at all, and I never see anyone talk about it, and that's why I feel it's very underrated. It doesn't get the usage and attention that I believe it deserves. But perhaps it's just one of those situations where if we had a third Super Troop slot, it would be more prevalent and more people would use it. And finally, the Valkyrie. It's a very confusing time for the Valkyrie because for years, she was considered the worst troop in Clash of Clans by many, and even I put it in my recent list. But if you watch that part of the video to the end, I did mention she was beginning to see a resurgence due to hero equipment, and since then, she has only gotten more popular. Now, the only reason I think she is still underrated is simply due to her crazy resurgence lately being closely tied to how meta the Root Riders are. If they ever fell off the map, so would the Valkyrie to some degree. It's kind of like the Apprentice Warden, where before the Root Riders and equipment, no one was really talking about it. But yeah, let's just ignore the Root Riders for a second. Let's pretend they never existed. I think the Valkyries are underrated. Even at their worst, they weren't as bad as people said they were, and it's very interesting how equipment has breathed new life into previously irrelevant troops like the Valkyrie. I'd say give them a shot. They're fun. Just make sure to have more than enough support to break walls, because that's their main issue. But yeah, that is my list for the most underrated troops in Clash of Clans. Let me know if you agree or disagree with some troops. What are others that you might have added? As always, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, Havoc Gaming out. Peace!